Let me tell you something about time, love. It doesn't just pass. It lingers, it settles, it seeps into the walls of your tent and the corners of your smile. They don't warn you about that part. They say time heals. But what they don't say is that it first hollows you out, minute by minute, month by month, year by silent, swollen year. I wasn't always hollow. I wasn't born barren. I didn't come into this world aching for what I couldn't carry. No, I came with a name like royalty and a heart full of harvest. Sarai. It sounded like something golden on the tongue. I was young, radiant, newlywed, and deeply convinced that joy was just around the corner. We were in love, Abram and I. Real love. The kind that makes you believe that the stars are watching just for you. The kind where names scribbled in the dirt become promises. I used to imagine his hands cradling our baby's head. I used to hum lullabies to my own belly. I used to fall asleep whispering, maybe this time. We tried. Of course we tried. We made love with expectation. We counted days. We watched the moon wax and wane like it was an omen. And every single time, nothing. Just more time, more silence, more smiling in public and breaking in private. Year 1, I prayed. Year 2, I fasted. Year 5, I performed every ritual. By year 10, I started pretending I didn't care anymore. Not because I didn't care, but because hope started to taste like mockery. I stopped tracking cycles. I stopped counting stars. I stopped expecting anything at all. But you know what no one tells you about disappointment? It doesn't show up in a loud scream. It seeps into your bones quietly. It repaints your joy in shades of beige. It whispers, don't get your hopes up. And eventually you stop even whispering back. I stitched baby clothes anyway. Some women called it faith. Some called it foolish. But the truth? It was grief in disguise. I had a chest full of tunics never worn, tiny sandals never dirtied, blankets folded too neatly, never washed, never wept on. There was a corner of our tent I kept clean just in case the Lord changed his mind, just in case next spring was the one, just in case I wasn't forgotten after all. But each untouched item became an artifact of waiting, a museum of the woman I was supposed to become. And still, I smiled, because that's what we do, isn't it? We women who break in private, we carry the tea, we host the feast, we bless the marriages of women younger than us with bellies already round, and we say things like, God is good, even when we haven't heard his voice in years. I didn't stop believing in God. No, bestie. I just started believing he believed in other women more than me. Have you ever been the last one left in the waiting room of a promise? It's deafening. It's embarrassing. It's holy. But it never feels holy when you're in it. They started calling me barren like it was my name. Still no children? Bless your heart. Maybe next year. They smile with tight lips, but their eyes said what no one dared to. You're the reason. I wasn't infertile. I was shamed. And shame doesn't just sit on your shoulders. It weaves itself into how you walk, how you dress, how you avoid eye contact with younger women holding babies on their hips, how you bite your tongue when someone calls your child a burden, and you would have named yours Miracle. And Abram? He was kind, but kindness over time started to feel like pity. He would touch my hand gently during the feasts when other women breastfed in the corner. And I knew it was his way of saying, I still love you, but I didn't want still. I wanted to be loved because I brought legacy, because I bore life, because I was enough. There were nights I didn't pray. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how anymore. You ever try to talk to a God whose silence is louder than your tears? I'd open my mouth, and nothing came out but breath. Just breath. That was the prayer. I'm still breathing. And sometimes, even that felt like more than I deserved. I remember the day a young woman spilled her wine beside me and whispered, "Maybe you were meant for something else." She meant well, but it landed like a knife because I didn't want something else. I wanted what was promised. I wanted what came easy to everyone else. I didn't want a legacy built on spiritual metaphors. I wanted a child. Real. Wrinkled. Loud. Messy. Mine. They said I should count it a blessing to be Abram's wife. And I did. But even being loved by a great man feels small. When you lie awake night after night with empty arms and a womb that won't weep. And I know that sounds dramatic, but baby, when you've waited this long, drama is the only language your soul speaks fluently. I started laughing more, but not the joyful kind. The kind of laugh that creaks like an old door. The kind that sounds like sarcasm wrapped in perfume. When people asked how I was doing, I'd say, "I'm fine." And I'd smile. The kind of smile that should win an award for Best Supporting Actress in a faith film. I was performing faith, wearing worship like a costume, reciting promises like lines in a play I no longer believed I'd be cast in. And still, I hosted the strangers. I poured the wine. I rehearsed the scriptures. I repeated the blessings, because somewhere deep inside the hollowness, I didn't know how to stop believing, even if I didn't believe it for me anymore. I began dreaming about other women carrying my child, surrogates of salvation, midwives of mercy, my name on their lips, my legacy in their bellies. That's how far I had fallen, from promise to proxy, but that's not today's story. Today's story is this. I stopped praying for a child. I started praying for numbness, because sometimes when hope hurts too long, you don't want it anymore. You just want peace. So yes, I am Sarah, but first, I was Sarai, the woman who dreamed, the woman who wept, the woman who waited so long, even the sky forgot her name. And if you're still in your hollow years, if the tent is quiet, if the prayers feel stale, if your heart is heavy with maybe one day, let this be your sign. You are not forgotten. You are not unqualified. And the God who sees you in silence isn't done telling your story. They say faith moves mountains, but no one talks about what it does when it just sits there, unmoved, unchanging, uninterested in your tears. That's what it felt like by the time I stopped praying for myself. Not like God wasn't real, but like he was somewhere else. Still holy, still powerful, still present, but not here. Not in my tent. Not in my womb. Not in my egg. And that's when I did it. I gave him Hagar. I didn't plan it like a villain in a story. I didn't twist my hands and cackle over a cruel plot. I was just exhausted, so tired of being the only one without a story to tell. Every woman in our camp had birthed something. A child, a dream, a legacy. Me? I had linens, good manners, and a tent full of echo. So when I looked at Hagar, I didn't see her. I saw the possibility. I saw what I had run out of. I saw a body still filled with youth and bloom. A chance to feel close to a miracle, even if I wasn't the one carrying it. And in that moment, I didn't think I was giving up. I thought I was participating in the promise. That's the thing about desperation, bestie. It can sound a lot like divine strategy when silence is your only soundtrack. I brought her to Abram like a peace offering, like a solution wrapped in skin. And when he looked at me, really looked, I swear he saw how much it cost me. But he didn't stop me. He laid with her. And just like that, my nightmare wore the disguise of answered prayer. Do you know what it feels like to choose to break your own heart? To walk the woman into the tent yourself? To kiss your husband's cheek and say, "Go ahead, I'll wait outside." I didn't just give her to him. I gave away a piece of myself. I handed her the very thing I'd wept over for years. I tied a bow around my brokenness and called it faith. And when I saw the light in Abram's eyes, when he looked at her belly, I knew I'd made a mistake. At first, I tried to be noble, tried to bless her, tried to act like it was all part of some holy plan. But her eyes changed. She didn't say it aloud, but her glance said it all. I succeeded where you failed. And she was right. Her belly swelled like a prophecy. Mine stayed still like a forgotten promise. I started hearing whispers at the well, started seeing the way people glance between us like comparing stories, like comparing worth, and I felt mine shrink. Bitterness is a slow infection. It starts in the soul, but it shows up in how you speak, in how you glare, in how you pray for fire in private and smile in public. I didn't want to hate her, but I did, and not because she was cruel, but because she was evidence. She was the living proof of my failure. I asked God why. Why let me live through this humiliation? Why keep me close to the promise but never let me touch it? But he didn't answer right away. He didn't send a dream. He didn't send fire. He sent silence, the kind that felt like rejection wrapped in holiness. One night, I found myself staring at Hagar through the thin walls of our tent. Her hand was on her belly. She was humming, "It should have been me." I said it out loud. It should have been me. And for the first time, I let myself scream. Not out loud, but inward. A silent, gut-wrenching, soul-cracking cry that only the spirit could interpret. It didn't sound like a woman of faith. It sounded like a woman who'd believed too long and broken quietly. That's the dangerous thing about unresolved hope, bestie. It will have you calling holy things curses, and cursing sacred things right back. I started resenting God, started resenting his timeline, started questioning his character. I said things I won't repeat. I threw words into the desert like accusations, not because I didn't believe he was real, but because I knew he was, and that made the waiting hurt more. And Hagar? She started walking lighter. She began brushing her hair slower. She no longer bowed when I passed. She didn't need to, because power doesn't always come from position. Sometimes it comes from who's carrying the legacy. And I wasn't. And that truth, it cracked something ancient in me. So I punished her, not with lashes, not with poison, but with distance, with pettiness, with demands, with small humiliations wrapped in hospitality. It was the only power I had left, and it tasted rotten even as I wielded it. She ran. Of course she did. And somewhere out there, God met her. God met her. The slave woman, the outsider, the one I offered, then rejected. He didn't just see her, he spoke to her, and when she returned, she came back with her head high, and a God name on her lips I had never said before. El Roi, the God who sees me. I couldn't even be mad. Not at her. Not really, because something in me whispered. He saw her because I pushed her away. And that truth, it was too much to carry. So I buried myself deeper in the tent, deeper in fake smiles, deeper in pretending I didn't care. And the worst part, even Abram started to believe it. I became the woman who had everything. except the one thing that meant everything. They say comparison kills joy, but let me tell you, it also kills worship, kills intimacy, kills the sound of your own name when you try to pray and it gets stuck in your throat. I wasn't just barren anymore. I was bitter, and bitterness turns belief into poison. But here's the wild part, bestie. Even then, even in all that mess, God didn't walk away from me. He didn't abandon me to the weight of my own choices. He didn't let my shame be the end of the story. I thought the tent was my tomb, but it was just the waiting room. So if you're listening to this, and you've given up something sacred, because time made you tired, because waiting made you wild, because hope made you hollow, let me tell you something only a woman who's lived this can say. God still sees you. Even when you've given away the very thing you prayed for, even when you tried to manipulate the miracle, even when you became someone you barely recognized in the mirror, he still knows your name. And he's not done with you yet. You ever laugh so you don't cry? I don't mean the kind that makes your belly ache and your eyes sparkle. I mean the kind that escapes your lips like a leak in your armor. The kind that says, I've been disappointed too many times to believe you're serious. Yeah, that laugh. That's the one I let slip when the angels came to dinner. They didn't come like fire and lightning. They didn't split the sky or shake the mountains. No trumpets. No drama. Just men. 3 of them. Dusty feet, quiet confidence, eyes that looked like they knew things. They sat under the oaks like they'd always belonged there. Like Holy didn't need a spotlight. Just shade and bread. And Abram, bless his heart, rushed around like a boy with something to prove, barking orders, fetching calves, washing feet. I watched him from the tent flap, pretending I wasn't paying attention. But I saw it all. I saw the way his eyes sparkled in their presence, saw how his hands shook just a little as he served them, saw the glint of boyhood return to a man who'd been heavy for years. And I stood just out of sight, like always, because when you've been barren long enough, you learn how to stay close to holy things without expecting them to speak to you. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Okay, maybe I was, but when one of them looked straight at Abram and said, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" I froze. Not Sarai. Sarah. The name God had only just given me. The name of royalty and rebirth. The name I hadn't fully grown into yet. That's when my heart started thudding. Not in joy. In defense. Because I knew something was coming, and I didn't know if I had the strength to hear it. Then came the line, the one that shattered me and saved me all at once. By this time next year, your wife Sarah will have a son. I wish I could say I fell to my knees. I wish I could say I wept with joy. I wish I could say I ran out of the tent shouting, "Hallelujah." But I didn't. I laughed. Quietly. Mockingly. The kind of laugh that doesn't echo. Just folds in on itself like a letter never mailed. Because what else could I do? I was nearly 90. 90. My skin sagged like memories. My back curved like the arc of regret. My womb had been a grave for decades. And now you tell me the promise is coming? Now, when I've stopped wearing perfumes at night? Now, when I've let the cradle collect dust in the corner? Now, after I handed my hope to another woman and watched her raise my almost son? Now you show up? I didn't laugh because I didn't believe. I laughed because believing again hurt more than staying numb. Hope once buried doesn't like to be resurrected. It kicks, it screams, it claws its way through years of bitterness and forces you to feel again. And I wasn't ready to feel. Not now. Not at 90. Not when it felt easier to grieve the loss than re-risk the dream. They heard me, of course. One of the men turned to Abram and said, "Why did Sarah laugh?" And I panicked because in that moment, I wasn't just an old woman chuckling behind a curtain. I was a heart exposed. So I denied it. "I didn't laugh," I said, even though my soul still echoed with the sound. And then he said something that pierced me deeper than any promise ever had. "Yes, you did." He wasn't scolding me. He was seeing me. He saw the years behind the laugh. He saw the prayers I'd whispered into empty nights. He saw the tunics I'd stitched in silence. He saw the tent corners I'd swept clean, hoping to make space for a child that never came. He saw the woman who had stopped asking, oh, because she didn't believe God could, but because she believed he wouldn't. That laugh, it wasn't rebellion. It was resignation. It was the sound of a woman protecting herself from hope, because hope had become cruel. It had overstayed its welcome, and every time it knocked again, it sounded less like joy and more like teasing. But here's what shook me. God didn't revoke the promise. He didn't say, "Well, since you laughed." No. He doubled down. He named my laugh. And then he promised through it. Like he was saying, even your sarcasm won't scare me off. That did something to me. Not right away. Not dramatically. But it planted something. A tremble. A flicker. A whisper that maybe, just maybe, he still remembered me. I didn't come out of the tent that day. Not all the way, but I leaned closer. I stopped mocking as loudly. I stopped hiding so hard, because if he could still see me through the scoffing, maybe he could still speak through me too. And you know what? A year later, I did have a son, and I named him Isaac. It means laughter, because God turned my defense mechanism into a miracle. He turned my sarcasm into sacred. He took the very thing I used to protect myself from him and made it the name of my promise. That's the kind of God we serve. The kind who doesn't just redeem your faith. He redeems your fear, your faking, your flinching. So if you've laughed lately, not because something's funny, but because hope sounds ridiculous to you, let me tell you, God hears it, and he's not offended. He's just getting started. They told me I was too old, too late, too dry, too far gone. Even the mirror tried to agree with them. My hands, wrinkled like stories too long untold. My eyes, a little cloudier than they used to be. My walk, slower. My body, tired in ways only desert women know. But then, I felt it. Not just a flutter, not just a cramp or a twinge or the ache of old age. I felt something new growing inside something ancient. The first time it kicked, I dropped my bowl of water. I just stood there, trembling, staring at the wet floor like it had witnessed a resurrection. I had been carrying so much grief. I didn't even know how to carry joy. I didn't announce it with trumpets. I didn't gather the camp and declare, "The promise has arrived," because I wasn't sure it was real, not at first. Not until the swell became undeniable, not until I caught Abram watching me, his hand resting on my belly like he was afraid to wake up from the dream. He never said much about it, but his silence wasn't doubt. It was reverence. Do you know how holy it feels to wake up to the very thing you stopped praying for? How terrifying it is to finally get what you thought was lost forever. They don't talk about that part. The fear that maybe you'll lose it. The whispers of don't get too happy. It might not last. Even joy can feel like a test when you've known sorrow for too long. But then I held him. Isaac. The name rolled off my tongue like the last line of a song I didn't know I'd been singing all my life. It means laughter, and that's exactly what escaped my lips. When they laid him on my chest, not the laugh of doubt, not the one I tried to deny when God called me out. This was a laugh I didn't recognize. Light, real, reckless, holy. A laugh that broke open my bones and let joy pour out like oil. I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways, but nothing prepares you for the feeling of skin-to-skin salvation. His tiny fingers curled around mine, like he was anchoring me to the promise. His eyes opened wide, and for a second I swore they looked just like Abram's. And then I wept, because the womb they all said was dead. It delivered destiny. The woman they called barren, she birthed a beginning. The tent changed that day, no longer silent, no longer shadowed by shame. It echoed with coos, with cries, with lullabies I'd been saving in my chest for years. Women came from every direction just to see it. Not just the child, but the miracle. They touched my shoulder and said, "You are the proof he still hears." And I believed them, but what they didn't see, the tears I shed in secret, not from pain, from guilt. Because I had mocked it, I had laughed. I had doubted the very thing I was now rocking to sleep. It felt wrong to be so loved after being so faithless. But God didn't just give me a child. He gave me grace. Not the kind that shows up only when you're worthy. The kind that shows up anyway. I remember one night holding Isaac while the fire burned low. The whole camp had gone quiet. Even the wind seemed still. And I whispered into his curls, "I almost missed you." My voice cracked. He stirred a little. I pressed my cheek to his forehead and said it again. "I almost missed you because I thought God had." But he didn't. He never forgot me, never revoked the promise, never said, "Too late, Sarah." No. He waited until the moment it would mean the most, until my heart was cracked wide enough to receive it, until my laugh could shift from sarcasm to sacrifice, until I would know, without question, that this was not coincidence, this was not earned, this was grace in flesh. So now, when I hear women whisper in the corners of tents, saying things like, "Maybe it's too late for me," or "Maybe he forgot," I walk right up to them. And I hand them Isaac. I say, "Hold the proof. Let him wrap his fingers around your doubt. Let his laugh echo into your silence." Because sometimes the best sermon isn't a word. It's a child born in the waiting. And if you're listening to me right now, somewhere under your own tent of ache, wondering if joy can still find you, let me testify. It can, not just joy from answered prayer, joy from knowing you were never forgotten, not for a moment, not when you laughed, not when you broke, not when you handed your hope to someone else. He still came through for me, and he will for you. They don't tell you how loud a promise gets once it learns how to run. Isaac's feet were like thunder in our tent, little legs, all energy and light, crashing through rugs and breaking silence like it owed him something. I used to dream about those sounds. Now I lived inside them. Every laugh that burst from his lungs. A reminder that God didn't just promise me joy. He let me raise it. But here's the thing they also don't tell you. Raising a miracle comes with shadows. Because the past doesn't vanish when the promise arrives. It just gets quieter until something wakes it up again. And that something was Hagar's boy. Ishmael. He was older, bigger, already had years of firsts in his father's eyes. And I tried bestie. Oh, how I tried to smile at him like he was just another boy. But he wasn't. He was the reminder, the result of that season where I stopped believing God's timeline could include me. He was the product of my plan B. And watching him now, laughing near Isaac, too loud, too rough. It wasn't just tension, it was trauma resurfacing in sandals. One afternoon, I caught him mocking. I don't know what he said. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was teasing. But I saw the way Isaac's face dropped. And that was it for me. My mama heart didn't hesitate. I went straight to Abraham and said the words I had never imagined would leave my mouth. Send her away. Send them both away. And let me be honest, it broke something in me to say it. Because I knew what I was asking. I knew Hagar wasn't the villain. I knew her boy didn't ask to be born this way. I knew deep down that this wasn't about cruelty. It was about protection. But I had waited my whole life for Isaac. I had bled out prayers in silence, buried hope beneath smiles, and watched my body dry up like the land around me. And now that the miracle was laughing, I couldn't let anything threaten it. Not even a child I once claimed as my own. They judged me for that decision. Maybe you're judging me right now, but let me say it straight. It is not evil to draw boundaries around your promise. It is not selfish to protect peace when it finally arrives. It is not weak to say, no more competing voices in this tent. It is not sinful to want your child to grow up in joy, not in comparison. God backed me up. He told Abraham, do what she says. And that's when I knew. He didn't just give me the child. He gave me permission to guard the joy I'd almost lost. But that didn't make it easy. I watched Hagar walk away, watched her figure shrink on the horizon, held Isaac close while the dust settled from their leaving, and I grieved because being chosen doesn't always feel like celebration. Sometimes it feels like cost, and choosing your promise often means releasing your past. Isaac didn't understand. He asked where they went, why they didn't come back, and I had no answer that wouldn't wound us both. So I just held him tighter, whispered, your joy, your laughter, your legacy. And he rested against my chest like he believed me. But can I confess something? Even after all of it, sometimes I still look out at the road they left on. Not out of guilt, out of memory. Because for a while, that road was mine too. And I need you to hear this, bestie. Just because you've walked into your promise doesn't mean you forget the detours that almost became destinations. So now I live in both. In the sound of Isaac's laughter and the ache of what had to be left behind. In the peace of fulfilled promises and the tension of human decisions. In the freedom of finally being seen. And the humility of knowing I didn't always get it right. But grace held me through it all. God didn't remove his promise when I tried to rush it. He didn't revoke his plan when I got in the way. He just waited, and when the time came, he let me taste laughter again. Real, rooted, rolled in the dust with my son kind of laughter. The kind that says, I made it, even when I shouldn't have. So if you're holding joy in one hand and guilt in the other, if you're celebrating your miracle while still grieving the mess it came through, welcome. You're not broken. You're becoming. You're a mother of legacy. You're a woman of war and wonder. You're walking the same dusty path I did, and God is still with you. There are some stories you never imagine yourself telling. This is one of mine, because how do you confess that after a lifetime of waiting, a cradle full of promises and laughter that rebuilt your lungs? God whispered again, and this time, he asked for what you loved most. Isaac, my miracle, my laughter in the flesh, my proof that even when I doubted, God delivered. And now, he was calling Abraham to give him back. I heard it in Abraham's silence first. He didn't tell me. Didn't have to. I know that man's face like I know the stars. And when he walked in with that look, that 1,000-mile stare, lips pressed like he was holding back a scream, I knew. God had spoken, and it had torn him apart. I asked him where they were going. He said, to worship. I asked, with what? He said, God will provide. But his eyes betrayed him. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled while packing the wood. And when he tied Isaac's sandals with too much care and kissed his forehead a little too long, I felt it in my womb again. The ache of loss, that old familiar emptiness. It knocked the wind from me, because you don't need a scroll to tell you when your spirit is about to be asked for something sacred. I wanted to scream, but I'd learned something over these years. Sometimes faith is loud, but sometimes it's just breath. So I waited. I waited while Abraham and Isaac walked away. I waited while every step they took sounded like thunder inside my chest. And I watched until they disappeared beyond the hill. That's when I fell to my knees. I didn't ask for this. I asked to be seen. I asked to be remembered. I asked for a child, and God gave it to me. But now he was asking for that joy back. What kind of God gives a promise wrapped in laughter only to ask for it on an altar? What kind of mother am I if I let him go? What kind of faith holds on while letting go? I didn't move from that spot for hours, didn't speak, didn't cry, just breathed and begged. I whispered Isaac's name until it became a prayer. I traced his face in my memory. Those almond eyes, the smirk he got from Abraham, the way he used to wrap his hand around mine like he was born knowing it fit there. And I asked the sky, is this who you are? I think we all come to that moment eventually. That altar season, when God doesn't just ask for our sin, but our joy. Not our failures, but our fruit. It feels cruel. But what I didn't know yet was that love without offering isn't love. Faith without fire isn't faith. And some promises are so holy, they have to be laid down before they can truly rise up. I don't know how long I stayed there, but at some point I heard a sound I'd never heard before. Laughter. Not from Isaac, not from Abraham, from heaven. It was like joy unbreaking, like glory untangling from grief. And then I saw them coming back down the hill, together, whole. Isaac ran to me like a boy who had touched death and come back blazing. And Abraham, he just looked at me and nodded. Tears in his beard, ashes in his smile, but alive. God had provided. A ram in the thicket, a substitute, a second chance. I held Isaac tighter than ever, not because I almost lost him, but because I finally understood. He was never mine to begin with. He was always God's, just on loan. And my job was never to grip the promise. It was to guard it, grow it, and one day give it. You see, bestie, this faith walk isn't just about miracles. It's about maintenance, about what you do when the miracle asks for room. It's about unclenching your fists around the very thing you once begged God for. Not because you don't love it, but because you love him more. And he is worthy, even when it hurts. That was the day I became more than a mother. I became a living altar, one who knew what it meant to trust past the terror, to release without a guarantee, to love in a way that echoed eternity. And I would do it again, because the God who asked for Isaac is the same God who let me hold him again. Only this time, with open hands. I didn't die on that mountain, but part of me did. The part that thought I had to hold everything together by myself. The part that still feared God would take more than he gave. The part that forgot that trust isn't a transaction. It's a tether. And now I live in the after. The miracle still breathes. The promise still plays. And I've learned something I wish I could tell every woman holding a blessing with trembling hands. Don't fear the fire, because when God gives it, he'll teach you how to carry it. Isaac wasn't the only thing I was raising. I was raising legacy. And legacy doesn't start when you die. It starts when you decide. So I decided. No more shrinking into the background like I didn't co-write this story. No more erasing my laughter to make others more comfortable. No more apologizing for the God who made me laugh when I thought life was over. I started telling it to the women at the wells, to the girls brushing their hair outside their tents, to the mothers still waiting with flat stomachs and full hearts. I told them about the time I laughed at God and the time he made me laugh for real. I told them about tents full of jealousy and altars built from heartbreak. I told them that sometimes your name changes without anyone announcing it, that one day you're Sarai, barren and bitter, and the next you're Sarah, mother of nations. I taught them to watch the skies, to trust the silence, to believe that just because heaven isn't loud doesn't mean it isn't listening. I taught them how to cry and keep walking, how to knead bread with prayers, how to laugh without shame, because legacy isn't just about lineage, it's about language. The language of faith, of fire, of the fierce kind of womanhood that births nations even when nobody believes in you. Isaac grew, and every time he looked at me with those eyes, the ones that held galaxies of promises, I remembered what I almost missed. If I had stayed in bitterness, if I had clung to control, if I had refused to let go, I would have never seen this sun, this joy, this living, breathing evidence that God doesn't need my help. He just needs my yes. So I stayed soft. I stayed present. I didn't just raise a child. I raised the next step in a covenant that would stretch through centuries. He was fire, and I was the one who taught him how not to be burned by it. You see, I used to think I was the side character, the subplot, the barren backdrop to Abraham's great call. But then I realized something. God changed my name too. And when God changes your name, he changes your narrative. He redefines you. And every tent you walk into after that, it shifts. Not because you forced it, but because you carry the shift within you. So now I speak like a woman who was renamed. Not because I did everything right, but because I was loved right through all my wrong. Because I doubted and still got the dream. Because I laughed and still held the legacy. Because I messed up the middle and still made it to the mountaintop. You want to know what legacy looks like? It looks like freedom passed through fingerprints, like worship passed through wombs, like stories told until they become survival manuals for the next girl God is calling. And you, yes, you bestie listening to this, you carry legacy too. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you've endured. You were chosen, even if you felt discarded. You are fireproof, even if you've walked through hell. You are an echo of Sarah's laughter. You are proof that legacy doesn't start when they remember your name. It starts the moment you say, God, use me anyway. I always thought I'd live to see it all. Isaac Crown, his wife, their children, a tribe too big for one tent, a joy too loud to be mistaken. But sometimes the promise stretches past your lifetime, and that doesn't make it less true. It just means your legacy has roots deeper than your days. I felt it before I saw it. My time. It crept in quiet, not with sickness, but with stillness. I woke one morning, and the world felt finished, not empty. Just full, complete in a way that whispered, you did what you came here to do. And I smiled, because I had. I had walked barren and birthed. I had doubted and believed. I had fallen and gotten up. I had watched legacy walk away with wood on his back and run home with mercy on his face. I had mothered a nation, even if all they saw was one boy. The last time Isaac kissed my cheek, I held his face longer than usual, told him things with my eyes I didn't have words for. He looked at me confused, but smiled anyway. That's the thing about legacy. You don't always get to explain it. You just leave it, and they grow into the meaning later. When I laid down for the final time, there was no fear. I wasn't wondering what heaven would look like. I'd already seen glimpses of it, in Isaac's laugh, in Abraham's restored eyes, in the way God kept showing up with just enough, at just the right time. I didn't need angels this time, just peace. And peace is what I had. They say I was buried near Hebron, near the oaks of Mamre, in the cave Abraham bought because he wanted me close, even in death. And that cave, it became the beginning of something. And that cave is the beginning of something great, because from that place, a family grew, a people rose, and generations later, they still whisper my name, not because I was perfect, but because I persevered, because I laughed again, because I walked through bitterness and built a life that outlived the ache, because I left the tent with fire still in my bones. So if you're wondering what it means to finish well, let me tell you, it's not about having the final word. It's about planting seeds in the ones who do. It's about blessing the journey. Even if your feet don't walk the full length of it, it's about knowing when to sit back, when to speak, and when to just smile, because you know the God you walked with is still walking with them. So yes, this is how I left the tent. Not with regret, not with a scream, but with a laugh, because even in my final breath, I remembered God kept every word, and he still is. They said I was gone, but you don't bury a woman like me. You plant her, and what grew from my grave wasn't just bloodline, it was belief. You think laughter dies when the woman does? No, baby. Laughter lives in the bones of those she bore. Every time Isaac smiled, that was me. Every time his children asked about the woman who waited too long and still got her joy, that was me. Every time a girl questioned her worth because the world said she was too late, too tired, too barren, and someone told her, "No, baby, you come from Sarah," that was me. They called me the mother of nations, but I was also the mother of legacy faith, the kind you don't wear in public, but whisper into children at bedtime, the kind that walks miles with servants and still stops to tell them, he'll come through. Just wait. The kind that messes up royally and still dares to believe God isn't done. I wasn't perfect, but I was persistent, and that's what carried. They carried me in stories, in scrolls, in sacred memory. But more than that, they carried my spirit, my laugher's faith, my barren turned blessed boldness. You don't need a statue to be remembered in heaven. You just need to obey when no one's watching. You just need to walk when your knees shake. Isaac passed me down, not just a name. In knowing, he told his children she doubted God, and God still did it. And that's how my echo was born. I wasn't remembered because I never fell. I was remembered because I stood up anyway. That's the kind of faith that multiplies. That's the kind of woman I became. An echo loud enough to reach eternity. So if you hear me now, it's not because I'm haunting. It's because I'm heritage. I'm the whisper that tells you you can laugh again. I'm the breath in your chest when you want to give up, but you don't. I'm the fire in your belly when you dare to believe God after disappointment. I'm the echo that reminds you he keeps his promises, even when we fall asleep before the full picture unfolds. My name still floats through tents and hearts and pulpits and midnight prayers. And every time a woman clutches her womb in prayer, or rocks a miracle that came after the due date, or lets go of control and says, "God, I trust you anyway," that's me. I'm still here, in legacy, in lineage, in every soul that believes a laugh can come after the storm. So this is it. My final breath on the wind, the last ripple in the well, the final thread in the tapestry I didn't realize I was weaving all along. I told you my sorrow. I showed you my joy. I confessed my shame. And still, he kept me. He didn't just restore me. He rebranded me. From bitter to beloved, from barren to blessed, from side character to sacred storyteller. This is the part where most stories end, but mine multiplies. They say a woman like me should have been forgotten, too old, too messy, too late. But I learned something. God doesn't just use your prime. He uses your pain. He builds altars out of your ashes. He makes nations out of nobodies. He makes mothers out of mockery. And if he did it for me, he'll do it for you too. You, listening now, you carry this flame. You carry Sarah in your voice. When you choose hope over despair, you carry Sarah in your stride. When you walk in rooms that told you you'd never belong, you carry Sarah in your hands. When you raise children, visions, or ministries born from a place they said was dead, you carry me. You are me. Because this faith, it didn't die in the desert. It didn't end at the altar. It didn't stop at the grave. It lives on in you. So let them call you late. Let them count you out. Let them mock your prayers and mislabel your process. And then do what I did. Laugh anyway. Not because it always makes sense, but because you know who wrote your story. Laugh in the face of every delay. Laugh over every closed door God broke through anyway. Laugh like your laughter is prophecy. Because baby, it is. So this is my final confession. I was never forgotten. Even when the womb was empty, even when the tent was silent, even when I doubted, even when I got it all wrong, I was never forgotten. And neither are you. You were never too late. You were always his plan. And now you carry this laughter forward. You are the next echo. So go ahead. Laugh. Laugh. And when they ask where your fire came from, tell them a woman named Sarah learned how to laugh again and never stopped. And if you listen close, you can still hear me laughing over your breakthrough, through your midnight prayers. Inside every answered promise, I'm still here, not as dust, but as declaration. You were never forgotten, and the best is still unfolding. That's the end, Dusty. But oh, and it's just the beginning.
You've just heard another Gospel Girl confession, where truth doesn't hide, and grace doesn't flinch. If this one hit your heart, let us know in the comments. And please help us get Sarah's story heard. Like, share, subscribe, and meet us here next time, because the Bible's got more secrets to spill like a hot tea on Sunday.